and get him into aftercare.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well let's jump in. Yeah, welcome. Season one, episode one. This is Building Better by WCP Building Renewal. New series where we're going to be having a conversation with some industry experts, just get their insights. I'm Stephen Bailey. I'm going to be joined today here by Nick. He is the co-founder of Foresight recruitment group. Nick has spent more than a decade in recruitment across firms like Hayes, Adecco, before launching his own firm, Foresight. And today we're going to be talking about some, questions around talent, leadership, really just how sort of strong teams support better outcomes, right? So, Nick, thank you so much for being here.
No, I appreciate you having me on, especially as part of the pilot. I guess this is the litmus test, right, for the future of the series. So no pressure,
Yes,
I guess. But
no
no,
pressure on
very
you,
very
man.
appreciative to be here, Steve.
Yeah, no pressure on you at all. Hey, I always say the pilot always needs to be the best, one of the best episodes of a series. So,
Right?
yeah, yeah. So, I guess, just kind of starting off, Nick, you're kind of everywhere when it comes to biz dev, and it's fun, it's really great to see. I'm happy you and I kind of have created more of a personal relationship. But let's rewind a little bit, right? I just
Mhm.
want to kind of figure out, and share a little bit more about your personal journey. So, how did you first get into this industry?
Into recruitment.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
now you're going to make me think way back when. Honestly, fell into it. Didn't even really know what recruitment was until I had a conversation, and then ended up taking a role within the industry. Um, Quite early on, realized it was something that I enjoyed because it was the opportunity to connect with people and help support them within their career. So over the years, for myself, I've recruited within different industries, different fields. I've recruited within architecture, I've recruited within mechanical, electrical engineering, logistics, procurement, accounting, and finance. And then during my own career as well, I've had the opportunity to coach, mentor, bring people into recruitment, as well as manage sort of wider teams. So, for something, well, I should say for someone who never really knew what I wanted to do when I grew up, I managed to find something quite early on where I could come out and now build a career. And one of the opportunities I had whilst doing that was the ability to be able to bring my young family at the time over to Canada, and do that over here as well. So, um, looking back on all these years, lots of things have changed, lots of things remain the same within my
Mhm.
field, and for me, the North Star, the guiding principle is the fact that we work with people every day and we try and do
Yeah.
right by them when it comes to helping support them with decisions and things that not only just impact them, but also their family, right? When it comes to career and making a move.
Yeah, well, I mean, when it comes to levels of importance, a career and a job is right at the top of the list. That's like a top three sort of element to people's lives. So, having a direct impact on that, I imagine, well, and I know from historical experience, it's very rewarding.
Mhm.
Um, so hold on. So kind of following that trail along. So you spent a decade at sort of larger recruiters, right? Hayes,
Yeah.
Adecco, I had mentioned that. But before co-founding Foresight in 2024, what was sort of your aha moment or like the turning point that kind of made you take that leap into starting something new?
Yeah, I think it was honestly, and I'll be a little bit vulnerable here. Quite early on, I knew I wanted to run my own business. And over the years, I think I always found excuses of why now wasn't the right time. So whether that was getting married, buying a house, having children, moving across the country, moving back post-pandemic, having had my second child who's a COVID baby.
Yeah.
So it was the fear of taking that leap into entrepreneurship and building something whilst also being able to still support a family. And then I think for myself during my career, it got to a point where I was at a stage where if I was looking for a new opportunity, it was, again, I was working for somebody else, and building a business for them. So, cue in conversation with my business partner, David Little. Him and I have known each other for over a decade, having worked, for Hayes both back in the UK. I actually followed him over to Canada. So he came over in 2018, and I rang him and said, "Hey, what's Canada like?" And came over
Mm.
in 2019. And then even whilst we were both here, we recruited within the real estate industry, across different markets. So we had a good understanding of each other, and we got our heads together, and on the back of that decided, okay, well, if we are looking to build our own business, what do we want it to look like? And
Hmm.
how do we approach it? Because one of the good things coming from the larger organizations is you're taught the structure, and you taught processes and things like that. But I think the way the market is going, and as things have evolved, sometimes a human touch element is still missed. And one of the things
Hmm.
I've seen as well when I've recruited other people into the recruitment industry, especially since the pandemic, is there's a lot of people that focus on transactional recruitment rather than
Yeah. Yeah.
giving just solid advice, even if it doesn't necessarily benefit you right in that moment, and really specializing within an industry. I see a lot of generalists out there, and again, that's not a bad thing, but with regards to the real estate industry and how nuanced it is, you really need to have a good grasp to be able to attract and retain the type of people that you want working within that industry, right? And quite often people get misled by job titles, and you
Yeah.
can take, for example, a project manager means different things to different companies in different industries of different sizes, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and whether or not we talk about AI now, that's one of the reasons why AI doesn't really phase me. It's something we do use and help support in our businesses, but I don't see it necessarily, not in the near future, replicating
Yeah.
exactly what it is that we do.
Yeah, and I want to come back to that. I do have some talking notes on, project management, as well as AI. So we'll circle back on that. But one thing before we move on, because you've got a bit of a unique perspective when it comes to having done recruitment in different markets, right?
Hmm.
Because well, I wouldn't say you're new to Vancouver anymore, but you're within the first couple of years now, and
Yeah.
you've got a couple years under your belt. You've got years under your belt with other markets that you've done recruitment for. So I guess what do you find sort of like the major variations between the markets that you've done recruitment for? And this is an opportunity to be candid. Like, is there something you find in Vancouver that maybe is a little bit more difficult that you found in other markets, or even vice versa? Like, is there something in Vancouver that you have noticed is a little bit more um, no, I don't want to say easy, but a little bit more accessible, I guess, or just, differences.
Yeah, so my first home in Canada was in Ottawa. I often joke saying I survived 3 winters in Ottawa, right? I don't miss the -40. I can pop with the rain because that's all we get in the UK. And to your point, for us as a business, and myself specifically, having lived and worked in Ottawa and recruited for Eastern Ontario, Gatineau, and Atlantic Canada, and then now being based in BC, but having a team now that we're pretty much national.
Mm,
David's been in Alberta for the last decade, and then we have team members covering the GTA and further afield. Um, each area is always nuanced in terms of talent, and that could previously have been for migration. It just could be based on specific job titles.
mm,
Um, really, where like, and the roles that we typically recruit for, are always tricky to recruit for, right? And that's
mhm,
really
mhm,
why we are in business, right? Because ultimately, companies aren't going to pay us a fee to be able to do things that they can do themselves. And for
mhm,
us, candidly, we are never here to charge a client for something if we're not adding value to the process, or going, sort of above and
mhm,
beyond. So when it comes to particular nuances, it's knowing what's going on in that local region, whether it's from a economic development standpoint, whether it's from a talent standpoint. It could be even as something simple as just geography in terms of people wanting to travel and what commutes look like, right?
mhm.
So Ottawa specifically, you know, you've got the 417 that runs. east to west, and people from Kanata, for example, will not work in Orleans, right?
Yeah.
Vice versa. Um, and then again, you throw into the whole COVID and the pandemic and the remoteness of now people working on a remote basis, and the reluctance to now be able to come back into that downtown core and want to work from the office, again proves to be challenging when companies are now looking to hire and they want people to be in an office. So um,
Hmm.
thinking about Vancouver specifically, I think anyone that lives here knows, the North Shore is the North Shore.
Yeah.
And commuting there, you're going to spend some time on one of the two bridges. But even wider afield, we're seeing a lot of growth further east, right? So there's future opportunity now for people to come out and work in Surrey, or you're seeing a lot of development going up in Langley and further afield.
Hmm.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I mean it kind of touches on a couple other questions that I had for you as well, so that's great. Yeah, I mean I want to come back to that whole sort of remote structure. I'm sure we could probably have a full hour-long conversation on that alone and the market sort of shifting and how people are adapting to that. But one thing, I wanted to pull back to and kind of not a pivot, but more so just like from an industry standpoint, you've obviously worked in this space through, different market cycles,
Yeah,
right? And I know you oversee a lot more roles than just property management, but
yeah,
what are the key trends, I guess, you're seeing in hiring across property management slash building operations today, right? Like, how are clients responding to that? And you had mentioned, hybrid work,
yeah.
technological advancements, retention even, obviously that's a tough one. So, yeah, how are you kind of seeing or consulting with clients to adapt to
Yeah.
that?
Great question. I think the overarching challenge, which we're seeing across Canada, regardless of the market, whether it's in property management, building operations, is the fact that it is an aging workforce, right? And it's also an area which the people that work in it often fall into. It's not necessarily seen as sexy as the trades or working
Yeah.
for a GC or going into construction. Um, and with a lot of senior operators looking to sunset on their career, there's now a big skills gap in the middle, right? Where yes, we're now trying to get more people into the industry, but there's always going to be a knowledge transfer gap, right?
Hmm.
Um, as we move forward, there's a lot more duties that are being absorbed by these people, and we can talk about ESG, sustainability mandates, an increase and more transparency around like reporting and obviously tenant expectations. Um, and really, what we've also seen, especially since the pandemic, is a lot of people now get pushed out of the industry. So there's a big challenge there of not only attracting but also retaining talent and then getting them up to speed
Yeah.
when a lot of experienced people are looking to um, move on and sunset on their career. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
for us, the challenge is always going to be, where can you find people from? And I think over the last number of years, one things we've seen is a massive increase in salaries, but fundamentally, it's not sustainable. There's always going to be a
Hmm.
company that pays more. Um, there is no silver bullet to fix that problem until we get more people into the industry, and create the awareness of the different career pathways that exist within building operations, within
Yeah.
property management. And that's something that we're doing in the background with, a couple of the associations, or whether it's through, careers guides, whether it's through events, because that's the problem that we see, right? Where when companies are looking to hire, well, so are seven, eight of their potential competitors or like for like companies, and the talent isn't always necessarily there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is, an industry. Again, I was in Ottawa when the pandemic hit, and we were quiet for 3 months whilst people were navigating how to deal with what was going on in the world. And then it got extremely busy because a lot of these buildings, whether they're occupied or not, they still need to be maintained, they still need to be managed, and sometimes more so because if you don't have tenants in there reporting roof leaks or issues, you dealt with a lot of issues on the back end to now try and remedy and deal with. So touch wood, I don't want to say it's recession proof, but it's one of these
Yeah.
industries, especially from an operation standpoint, where whether the shovel's going in the ground or not, buildings still need to be maintained and managed.
Yeah, and I mean yeah, I'm glad you said that. It's a great segue. And even just from our experience, I mean, a year ago today, we were going through a ton of external market factors that were outside of our control. And I think a lot of people felt that pressure. But it's just, it's trends in the market. And that being said, again, I don't want to say that what we do from a building renewal company is entirely recession proof because we did feel the impacts
Yeah,
of the economy and the fluctuation that it went through. However, you've got an asset, it's deteriorating. That work can't be ignored forever. And that's a good, I think like when it comes to project manager or sorry, property managers, PMs, and their sort of ability and kind of tying this back into kind of what we do and our
yeah,
experience in interacting with property managers, their ability to plan, major renewal or envelope projects, where do you see the biggest gaps in talent and team structure that often get overlooked before the work even starts, right? And in addition to that, how can property managers adapt themselves for getting ahead of these knowledge gaps and really starting to
yeah.
kind of supplement what they do so they have more to offer coming into these roles?
Yeah, no, great question again. And really, this is something we talk to a lot of our clients about when they are, looking for someone in a property management seat or a building operations seat. It's like, okay, that's great, but you're not coming to us to put a bum on a seat, right? What's the
Yeah.
intention behind this role? What's what are they really doing at its core? And for a lot of companies, when they are, especially on the property management side, building operations side, looking to hire, um, the unwritten question is, okay, is this person going to come in and help elevate the asset over the next 5 years, right?
Mm, mm.
Are we looking to hire to have someone just to maintain, improve, or is it someone that's going to help us lead through change? Often we see a lot of hiring decisions made reactively, right? Where
Mm,
somebody was in the
right.
seat, they've now moved on, so people are
Yeah.
looking for a like replacement. But the best ones and the ones that I get very excited about are the strategic hires, where
Yeah.
companies are looking to bring someone in, knowing what's down the runway in 6, 12, 18 months' time. And really, they're looking for a person to now build the role around. And there's talk about obviously succession planning. There's talk around hiring ahead of major capex, and really building bench strength and adding to the
Yeah.
team and
Yeah.
plugging in those sort of gaps, right? Um, and really, my message always and where we see it is if you're planning major capital projects, whether it's HVAC replacement, looking to reposition your building or do large TIs, or even energy retrofits, right? Obviously, with the decarb program and things like that, you need to get ahead of it in terms of looking at your bench and wondering, okay, do we have the talent currently, or is that
Hmm.
something we now need to be able to go and find? And I often joke, you talk to anyone on the finance side that's gone through a Yardi implementation, they'll tell you you can have a plan and you can have the best will and intention, but expect things to go sideways and
It's like the
people
famous Mike Tyson quote, right? Everyone has a plan until they get punched.
punched
So,
in the face,
yeah.
right? And that's something we use within our business, right? My business partner David puts it a little bit more eloquently, but you can plan and plan, but the best people you want on your team are the ones that can now adapt and react to when things aren't going necessarily to plan.
Right.
And that's where, especially when we talk about the real estate industry, um, it really takes a village, right, to look
Yeah.
after assets between the trades contractors, the people that you can rely on when things need to be dealt with because they're not necessarily going to plan.
Yeah. 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 100%. And going back to your point about just butts and seats, what was the saying? It's not necessarily Mr. Right, but Mr. Right now, right? And just, you fill someone in and then you're setting yourself up to deal with issues kind of down the road. But
Mhm.
so again, just kind of pulling this back into, your involvement in the community. You were recently involved in the Canadian Real Estate Forum. And I mean, you're all over sort of other industry events. BOMA, I know you're a national partner. ICSC. I believe you were just appointed to be the chair for, is it
The
Western
Next Gen
Canada or
Committee in BC. Yep.
say that one more time?
So I'm the chair of the Next Generation Committee for BC on the
There you
Canadian
go.
Marketplace.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. Well,
Tongue twister
congrats
right
again on
there.
that. But I think, with this emphasizes people over noise,
Mhm.
right? So what do, in your experience, because now you've kind of interacted with a ton of different associations, you've laid a great foundation for just your network. But what do these physical sort of meetups teach you, or what should it teach people? About the human side of of your industry, right? That a job
Yeah.
posting never will.
Yeah. Um, Two parts to that. The first and foremost for the industry as a whole. Um, Again, we were locked indoors for a couple of years, coming out of COVID, and I think we'll still see the impacts of that for many years, right? In terms of what that's done to people with regards to mental health and other things, and even with people that like myself have had children during that era. Um, I know when I first started going to events, anxiety was real, right? Being
Yeah,
in
oh
a
yeah,
room,
yeah.
especially large rooms full of people,
Oh, you think you walk into a room, you think everybody's eyes are on you, and that's not
right?
the case because everyone feels the exact same, right? So
Right. And I remember reading an article like, if you want to meet someone, the first place you go is you go and find the bar, right? Because people walk into a room and they feel empty-handed. So the first thing they
yeah,
do is go and get a drink type thing, and then
yeah,
they
yeah,
turn around and hover, right? But no, anxiety was real. But then, you go to events, you meet people, you have just honest, candid conversations with people and what they're experiencing. And I feel, there's so much to that in terms of camaraderie, people sharing challenges, people sharing wins. I've had an opportunity now with the business. We've gone to so we do a lot with the forums in Western Canada, with the real estate forums across Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton. I went out to the one in Ottawa last year. And it's just great to see the energy in the room. People are there to learn, to grow, to network, and develop their own knowledge base. Um,
yeah,
and just the conversations that you have in the room cannot be replicated in an online setting, right? The
yeah,
chance
yeah,
meetings that you have with people, that you strike up a conversation with, it just can't be replicated in an online format, not to that size. For myself, from a recruitment perspective, really we are as good as our network, right? When clients approach us to either go out in a headhunt or help them source a role, it comes down to, okay, who do we potentially know, or who do we have in our network that can introduce us to someone else? So
yeah, yeah,
um, for us, our main form of business development or managing our network is going to events, as well as being in the room to understand what's going on in the industry. We
mm,
don't Dave and I were quite clear from day one. We never wanted to be just seen as a recruiter recruiting into the real estate industry. We see the real estate industry as our industry, and it's something we're quite passionate about, and something we love to get involved with. And whether or not that's going to events, or even with our time and volunteering on committees and associations and things like that.
yeah. Yeah, 100%. I find that anytime I've interacted with an association, you obviously got to find the right ones, but the more you give, you're only going to extrapolate more, which is such a nice flywheel to get into. Okay, so pulling things back a little bit, I know we briefly touched on property managers, and you mentioned something about project management, right? So I just want to dive into that for a sec because we're seeing a lot of property managers basically become project managers when major construction or renewal projects is happening, right?
Yeah,
And that's our world. We're interacting with these guys constantly. It's one of our major client segments that we have, and it's really gotten to the point where we've actually built a whole presentation around, what does project management look like from the perspective of a property manager. But from your side, are you seeing this as a skill set that's becoming more sought after? And if you are, what can candidates potentially do to stand out in that area? And the ones that do stand out in that area, what are they doing differently?
yeah. One of the key takeaways, if we're looking at the industry as a whole and now zeroing in on, let's say, the office asset class, right? We know where vacancies are. We know that asset class has been absolutely battered over the last couple of years, and people have been flooding to either multifamily or to retail. Um, but one of the key things that we're seeing is the office isn't going to go away, but where we'll see is a clear divide between, the Class A versus the Class C type office. And I think what that's really ignited is a lot of landlords and owners to now start investing, and they have been over the last number of years, to really bring their space up to the top notch, right? And ultimately, a lot of that responsibility then falls onto the property managers, who now in turn into your
Yeah.
project managers, right? Um,
Well,
property
naturally
managers,
they become the pivot point, right?
right? And
The
property managers, they
yeah.
they they wear different hats, right?
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
often joke saying they wake up each day and they're wondering, right, which fire hose am I drinking out of today, right? Because they do so much, and it's sometimes you know almost disrespectful just to call them a property manager, right? Because they do so much more than just that, and to the outside world, no one really knows what they do, because if they do it extremely well, you wouldn't even realize that they're there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
When you walk into a building. So the big thing that we're seeing is a lot of the property managers that are now delivering capex projects and dealing with revitalization is, they've sort of, again, fallen into now doing that. So they've not necessarily gone away externally, gotten trained, to the lengths of what a PMP certification and things like that would do.
Hmm.
Um, and really, for anyone looking to focus on that, that's where I would say is, talk to your employer in terms of getting more project management experience, but also experience on the back end of, structured training in terms of how to deliver it, just from an information perspective, because you don't know what you don't know,
A
right? And if
hundred
you've only
percent.
done it
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
way, you don't know if there's more efficient ways to doing it or other things that you're looking at. So
Yeah.
learning should never stop, in that regard.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was doing a lunch and learn just yesterday, actually, with one of our property group clients that we
Mm.
work with, and the whole session was about expectation alignment and basically how property managers really become kind of the pivot point between owners, construction, tenants, right, and any other sort of third party stakeholder that may get involved. And one of the examples, one of the individuals that was in attendance had said was, I find that the contractor goes directly to the owner and leaves me out, and I'm almost the last person to get this information. So we had this whole conversation about, you need to pull the power back into yourself,
Yeah,
make it abundantly clear and set the expectation that all information funnels through you. Then in turn, you're essentially,
yeah,
making yourself a property or a project manager in this process, but you're also keeping yourself well informed, right? So
100%.
you had mentioned the somewhat intimidating, scary buzzword that I think is top of everyone's mind, which is AI at the moment.
Wouldn't be a
So
podcast if we didn't talk about it, right?
yeah, 100%. And I know we're coming close to time here. I feel like this has been great. There's a ton of other stuff that I want to talk to you, but this is obviously going to be a buzz and it's going to be top of everyone's mind. So I guess like, from your perspective and regarding AI and recruitment tech, I guess, where do you sort of see it helping firms the most? And where should human judgment sort of remain central? You already spoke to it about that human element and being able to gauge sort of the intangibles, right? But and that human interaction piece. But where are you kind of seeing it in your world? And I know it evolves quickly, so by the time this even comes out, who knows, maybe
Yeah,
we'll have robots that are doing our job for us. But just where are you seeing it in your current state as we sit today?
no, for sure. Within our world, and again, we use AI, and forms of it on a daily basis to help with our efficiencies and administrative tasks. But when it comes to the actual hiring piece, that's very much person and human interaction led, right? And quite
Yeah,
often it's
yeah,
because the roles that we're working on, it's not transactional. It's not, here's a square hole, can you go and find us a square peg? And I think, for again, with what we do, um, on the real estate side of things, you can go out and speak to any tenant in a Class A office building. If they could not get hold of their property manager or operations team, and they were dealing with, we have these help chat boxes and AI and stuff like that. I don't think they'd be tenants for very long, right? The
No,
human
no.
interaction piece there is not going to be replaced anytime soon. Is my thought process, right? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
ultimately, as humans, we are unpredictable creatures, and there's also a lot of emotions involved day to day type thing. And I don't think AI has quite grasped that just yet. Yes, we've seen it where you've got software out there that can sort of screen a resume and find people potentially that could be a good fit for the role, but that doesn't now go and convince that individual to leave where they currently are and come and join you, right? And that's the key thing here, where if we're in an industry where talent is in demand and there isn't enough people to meet the demand that's out there, quite often when you are recruiting or you're headhunting, you're trying to
Hmm.
convince someone who's already pretty happy where they are to now leave their current employer and join a business for the betterment of themselves, the family, whatever their reasons may be.
Yeah.
And I don't see, software and things like that necessarily incorporating or having those sort of conversations. I don't think, I think come back to being in that room full of people. I think that's where generally a lot of business gets done, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of networking and a lot of human interaction is made. And that's what people take away. So, yeah, like we'll absolutely use and incorporate AI. I think you've got to in this day and age, right? Otherwise, you end up being the blockbuster and being left behind.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you've still got to have the final say and accountability of whatever you then put out there using AI.
Yeah. Well, I think being open to leveraging AI in your day-to-day process, even if it's just for like, administrative tasks, it puts you ahead of a lot of people that are going to be reluctant to adapt. And then the additional piece to that is if you're constantly testing it as well, you're really putting, sort of the capabilities to the test. That puts you ahead of like 95% of the people, right? It's very interesting. I talked to a lot of property managers just through either our clients or doing lunch and learns or whatnot. I was doing one not that long ago, and in all of our presentations now, there's an element of AI that we like to include just
Yeah,
because it'd be foolish if we didn't. And I just asked the question, hey, if everybody that's in the room right now, who here is leveraging AI? And not only did less than 50% of the hands get raised, but there was adamant like backlash, like people pushing back on it, saying like they won't use it, they never will. And I thought, okay, well, that's, that's not good. You guys need to start
yeah.
like learning how to integrate this into your day-to-day process. But um, anyway, okay, well, hey, brilliantly put. I think, I don't want to create another interview where AI becomes sort of the anchor point. So we're going to move on. And I know we've got, maybe like 5 or so minutes left
One,
together.
one, one
So
final point on AI. I remember
yeah,
when
let's hear it.
it
Yeah.
was it was first in everyone's minds, and people worried about being replaced and things like that. One of the best sort of memes, if it were, that I saw, I think it was out of the UK, where as a building is being constructed, they have the scaffolding and around the outside, right, to aesthetically look after it, as well as safety and things like that. And large printed letters was, "Hey, Chat GPT, construct this building,"
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Oh, I know. It impresses me more and more. And I mean, hey, even like for us internally, being a bit more transparent about WCP, like we have like implemented, hey, you need to be able to like showcase how you are
Mm,
leveraging AI to make your job more efficient. And that's been kind of like a quarter over quarter goal distributed company wide. It's like, hey, let's interact, let's share, let's hey, like I always find it funny because the way person A is going to interact with it and leverage it is
yeah.
going to be totally different than person B. So I'm always interested to hear how people are using it. And anyway, so kind of pulling back a little bit and getting a bit more broad and just I want to wrap up and more so from like a reflection and like advice standpoint because you're obviously a wealth of knowledge. So I think, the question I want to pose to you is, if you could go back to the moment you founded Foresight, what is
Yeah,
one piece of advice you would tell yourself about building the right team and the right company culture?
it's a good question, and it's something I actually come back to a lot, right? And this isn't a cop out, but I think what we've done extremely well, whether it's dumb luck, whether it's obviously it was intentional, but it's really worked, and I wouldn't change a thing, right?
Yeah.
And part of that is it's just being authentic and being genuine in everything that we do, right? We're in a day and age where people see through bullshit, right? Um, and for David and I, we often joke saying we're anti-corporate. We're not anti-corporate, right? We're serious when we
Hmm.
need to be. But in terms of our day-to-day and dealing with people, we are ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And quite often when we connect with people, we want them to be themselves. And the advice we always give to people that are going for job interviews is be yourself, right? Because that then gives you an ability to really enjoy what it is you do rather than pretending to be someone that you're not. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
when I think back to what's worked and again, ego to one side, the success we've had, it's come from just being ourselves and putting ourselves out there. And I think that has really um, helped us solidify the relationships that we've built, in a short space of time.
Hmm.
And that's something that we also carry forward now as we have grown and hired other team members. And we say to them, look, be your unapologetic self, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Be human, be vulnerable. There's a lot of stuff that happens to us outside of work that may affect you in work. But this is a safe space, and like we'll support in any way we can, type thing. So yeah, I don't think I would change a thing at the moment.
Good. Yeah, and I mean, hey, I was fortunate enough to spend some time with a few members of your team, and it was pretty apparent that, all everybody there was very intentional and, a great company culture that you've created for yourself. And I think, drawing a comparison to you being in charge of placing people in businesses, it's reflective of how you are placing people in your own business, right? So that's, yeah, so you've done a great job of that. So,
The,
and
the, the
then
irony here is the hardest job for a recruiter is recruiting other recruiters.
I don't know how many times I've heard you in a conversation with someone and say, you'd make a great recruiter. So,
Right? Right?
um, so pulling this back, to more so a focus on just property managers, but also with sort of an undertone of like from our perspective and how we're interacting with them. I just wanted to get your take. So I guess like, what is a hiring or talent mistake you see owners or property
Yeah.
managers most often what mistakes do you see them make most often when they're planning big capital projects, like big renewal projects, right? So what would you tell them to prioritize instead?
Um, hire before you make decisions on what that project is because you want this person involved from the get-go. You want, we spoke earlier in terms of the communication piece. That is a surefire way to piss people off if they're not involved from the get-go,
Yeah,
or to annoy them if they're now picking up the slack on the back end, right? So the communication piece, it's having the person involved. Give them the responsibility and hold them accountable, right? If you're trusting them to deal with the project and deliver on it, then give them the ability and the support to be able to do so, rather than trying to sort of backseat drive it as well, right? You've brought them in to be able to do this role for you. Give them the trust to be able to do that. And then the other piece as well is on the back end, like when it comes to the projects, it's never a clear cut date, right? Everything's over. There's got
yeah,
to be a handover process, and it's ensuring that things aren't falling apart even after the fact, and there is a smooth handover, and there's clear communications amongst all parties if things aren't right or need remediation or whatever that may be.
right. Yeah, yeah, good answer. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so we're gonna move to wrap it up here.
Okay.
So, before we do, I just wanted to give you the chance to share, where can people find you and learn more about Foresight Recruitment?
Probably at a local real estate event coming near you sometime soon. No, we're obviously we're on LinkedIn. You can find our website, foresightRG.com. In terms of what it is we do, obviously it's recruiting within real estate, whether that's across property management, operations, finance, leasing. Our core client base is owners, managers, developers of real estate, and then we've got team members across Canada. So we work with clients on a national level as well, to help them with local people that are their boots on the ground to provide support.
Right on. Okay, and a final thought. Okay, so make sure it's as profound as you possibly can. But
Okay.
do you have any final thoughts or advice you'd leave for any owners, property managers, or teams that are currently listening to this?
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. Any final thought or piece of advice you'd leave for owners, property managers, or teams that are listening to this?
Absolutely. Make sure you listen to episode 2 because that means episode 1 wasn't a total failure.
Thank you. That's
We'll,
great.
we'll finish off how we started.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Okay. Nick, this has been great. Really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your perspective. Brilliant as always. And thank you to everyone again for joining us on Building Better. This was episode 1. Really appreciate you guys listening. Like Nick said, look out for episode 2.
Thanks, Stephen.
Right on. Thanks, Nick. All right.
And cut.
Cut.
Thoughts, feedback? Yes, you can come down. Sorry, that's the wife in
Oh,
the background.
it's all good.
She needs to head out to an RMT session, so she's running late.
Yeah, all good. No, that was awesome, and there was some really good, like I think a good well balance of like getting your perspective and
Yeah,
speaking to that, because for our client base, that'll be interesting. And then there was a good balance of like me trying to tie in like sort of our world and building renewal and how you kind of see that.
the
So
plug without it being a plug, right?
yeah, I didn't want it to come off as a plug
Yeah,
whatsoever, but like, like I've told my team this year, our marketing and biz dev strategy was just education first, right?
yeah.
Just lead by education. It positions you as a thought leader. So, and there's some really gold nuggets in this one. Like I've been making notes, so good like sound bites,
Yeah.
clips. So I sent you a list of like all the assets you're gonna get. I don't have a
Okay.
timeline on when those are going to come to you, but they will. But while I send those to you, I am also going to um, I'll let you know like kind of what our posting schedule is going to look like.
Yeah, if you shoot
'Cause
me a note when it's posted or whatever, it just means that I can jump on it on the back end for you and get it reset
yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
because I was thinking as we have like a great content asset, if
Yeah,
if we're distributing it at the same time, it'll just kind of maximize its reach rather than,
100%.
us posting it and then it kind of getting lost. So
Yeah.
So I'll keep you in the loop with how all that goes. But how did it go from your perspective? Okay.
Yeah, good. I think you realize I was trying to hold back a little bit at the start, right? In terms of specifics of like name dropping companies or whatever. Like
Yeah,
basically it doesn't really bother me anyway. People sort of know. Um,
it's on your LinkedIn. That's the only reason why I
yeah,
was
no, it
okay
doesn't
with
matter.
it.
It doesn't matter at all. And again, I used to use it a fair bit, and then I realized, oh shit, every time I say it, people then think I still work for Hayes. So I sort of
Yeah, yeah,
stopped,
yeah,
right? But I think we're past that now. It's one of those where, like, thinking back, hindsight, we did it again, you'd get completely different answers type thing, right? So
yeah,
you're
yeah.
always going to be able to sort of chip away at it. Hopefully, it's been useful for you, even if it's just a trial run or whatever, as you're doing it with other people and all that sort of stuff. Have you got a good lineup sort of confirmed for next
I've
week?
got 3 other people that I just need to lock in a date for. I'm really trying for like actual clients, but
Yeah.
I also want to layer in sort of just like industry professionals like yourself or affiliated trades. So there's kind of a healthy sort of balance. There's engineers as well that I've
Yeah.
talked to doing about this. If you have anybody on your radar that might be interested in doing something like that, let me know. I'd be happy to do it with them too. So
Yeah. Okay. No, sounds good. Um, just very quickly, also, I'm gonna be downtown. I'm staying downtown the day before we head out on the ski trip.
Oh, nice.
With my Vancouver Island guys, obviously I've got to fly him in, and we're jumping on the bus 7 in the morning. So I am
Yeah.
going to speak to Travis today and cheekily ask, saying, "Hey, there is a Canucks game on. Could we
Oh,
potentially go sit in your box type thing?" So
do they have a company box?
they do, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think so anyway, because he's asked me before after the Calgary forum saying, "Hey, do you want to come out?" But it was like a Tuesday, and I was like, I don't want to be heading back to Abbotsford after the fact. But I had a look yesterday, and there is a game on the 4th of March, I believe it is.
Yeah. I mean, I'm down to see if that would work. My initial thought is if I'm taking off to Whistler for
Yeah,
the day and night, maybe going to Canucks game the night before might not fly, but don't count me out. Because if maybe I'll talk to Travis, and I were actually texting this morning because if he is open to it, I could also ask a client and be
and
like,
that's what I was
hey,
gonna do. I was gonna
yeah,
say,
here's like six people you don't work with that would be a good
yeah,
intro. Let me bring one, and then
yeah,
it becomes a work event, right? So
100%. I was thinking of doing the same thing. So I messaged him yesterday night as I thought about it, saying, "Hey, are you doing anything in Edmonton at the moment? Because I've got a client here. She's a she's a director, but her portfolio is in Edmonton." And I was like, I'm sure she'd be open to coming to a Canucks game or whatever. Um,
yeah. Well,
so
like I said, I was texting him about something else
yeah,
entirely. So I'm gonna shoot him a note now and just say, hey, Nick mentioned maybe Canucks game. If I can get two tickets, I'll bring a good client that
I've
you.
not said
Yeah.
anything to him yet, so I need to
Oh,
call
you
him.
haven't?
No,
Oh,
no, no,
okay.
not yet, not yet. He texted me back just saying he was out in a client meeting, so I was like, I'll call you later today if you're home. And he's like, I'm working from home, and I was like, my first thought just went to the last time he was working from home.
Oh God, yeah. Okay. Well, yeah.
I'll keep you posted. I'll keep you posted. And I'll ask that question. I don't think he'd care. He's not too thingy about it, but I don't know if, for example, he's got other plans or he's doing something else either. But
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, hey, if it works, then that would be great. I'm trying to endeavor to like I'm taking clients to games and things like that.
yeah.
So I'm going to the you're going to be at the BOMA event next Thursday?
No, is that the QBT or
No, it's
the
the
breakfast?
Cowichan Tribe discussion. It's their Feb luncheon.
No, I'm downtown on Wednesday. And then I need to be back here on Thursday because I've got parent teacher conference and all that sort of shit, which
Yeah, all
is
good. Yeah, I
important.
was just
But
gonna say I'm endeavoring to bring clients out to things more. I'm actually bringing Sean
okay,
Stevenson from Low Tide to that one,
nice.
but yeah, but
Yeah,
anyway, man. Okay, thank you so much for today. I'll follow up with you with all like sort of the necessary things, but
yep.
really appreciate it.
No, likewise. Appreciate the opportunity. Enjoy the long weekend, bud. Text me and I'll keep you posted. I'm gonna probably give Travis a call now. So,
Yeah, when you after you talk to him, just shoot me a text.
all right, sounds good.
Okay, okay.